I'd like to introduce you guys to our keynote speakers. Robin Elliott is the co-founder and board member of Georgia Overdose Prevention. As a part of this team, they were instrumental in getting passages of Georgia's 9/11 medical amnesty and expanded naloxone access law, which happened in 2014. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention or not, but several articles have come out recently showing that overdose deaths have increased dramatically during this pandemic. Alcohol use is up, drug use is up, overdoses are up. This is probably one of those areas that is not talked about as much as it should because it's being overshadowed by the pandemic. But access to naloxone is a life-saving medication. And Robin and Lori were instrumental in getting this through in Georgia. Matter of fact, we have one of the most lenient programs in the state allowing access to naloxone. Robin is a widow, and her only child, Zach, died of a heroin overdose in May 1st of 2011, inspiring her work to get the passage of this law and be with us today to tell us her story. Lori Fugit is the co-founder and also a board member of the Georgia Overdose Prevention. She's a retired postpartum nurse from Kenneth Stone Regional Medical Center in Marietta. She collaborates with parents of children lost to drug overdoses to create one of the nation's most comprehensive 911 medical amnesty and expanded naloxone cares, once again for the laws of Georgia. Lori volunteers a great deal at the director of Georgia's Overdose Prevention. She's also one of those folks that coordinates training and distribution. And quite frankly, these two ladies are the reason that Georgia is ahead of the game when it comes to naloxone access. They're also one of the reasons that many of our students have learned the importance of naloxone. You do not have to be in healthcare to understand the importance of naloxone. It's our job as healthcare professionals to talk to our patients about why this is not necessarily something that's used in a healthcare setting. This can be used anywhere. Homes, nurseries, sorority homes, fraternity houses. It can be used at your grandparents' house. These are all things that you should be aware of. So Lori and Robin, I am going to take my screen share away and I'm going to step out of the way and let you guys take over. I want to say once again that we are so pleased that you took the time to be with us today. I know your schedules are overwhelmingly busy with the call and the need of this, but taking time for these students from these 4 colleges means a great deal to us. It also sets them up with some valuable information they'll take into their case for the afternoon. So thank you once again.
Thanks so much, Tim, for having us. Hi, my name is Robin Elliott, and this is Lori Fugit.
Hi.
Lori, say something.
Hi.
We are the co-founders of Georgia Overdose Prevention, which is a grassroots group of people that came together back in 2012 to try to get a law passed in the state of Georgia. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means to me is that it's been over 29 years since I've had my last mind-altering or mood-altering substance. This, if you can see him, is my son, Zach. Zach was a beautiful, bright, talented, sweet kid. He went to private school in Buckhead. He scored over 700 on all. There were 3 sections of the SATs when he took them. Played sports. His real love was playing guitar. He was popular, had a lot of friends, and he was also an opiate user. Zach knew about my background his whole life, so he was really careful and kind of anti-drug and everything as he was coming up through high school. When he was a sophomore in high school, he went to a party. He was 16 years old. It was October, and he called me from the party, asked me to come pick him up, which I did. He said, "Mom, the kids were about to take the dad's car, go buy some weed." He said, "I just wanted to get out of there." So, you know, it was needless to say, I was very happy. The next month in November, Zach went to another party. The kids were smoking weed when he got there, and he tried it. And by the following February, 3 months later, Zach had tried every drug there was to try, including opiates. So he went from 0 to 100 in 3 months. I figured it out really quickly. I mean, we know a lot of parents that are like, "Oh my God, I didn't even know my kid was using." Well, I knew right away. I didn't know what, but I knew he was using. So anyway, I packed him up and I sent him out to Utah. And he spent a year, his whole junior year in high school in Utah, in a residential treatment program out there. And in August, before his senior year in high school, he turned 18, and I kind of lost my leverage. He wanted to come home. I didn't really have any way to make him stay there anymore. So he came back to Atlanta and went his senior year here in Atlanta, and gradually ramped back up. His freshman year of college was a disaster. You know, very very bright child, honestly. And I know all parents say that, but he really did have a brilliant mind, and he failed almost everything his freshman year in college. So at the end of that year, he came to me and just said, Mom, I'm done. I don't want to live like this. I need some help. And one of his good friends was just finishing up a year up in Nashville, Tennessee in a recovery community. And Zach asked if he could go up there and try to see what he could do up there. So he went up and he did 30-day residential, 30-day 3-quarter care. And then he lived for really the next year and a half in a recovery community outside Nashville, Tennessee. Got a job, was working. He relapsed a couple of times during that time. First time they let him back in the sober living facility. Second time he had to go back through 30-day, back through 3-quarter care, and then ultimately back into the sober living. And so fast forward to December 2010, he was coming home for the holidays. And I was always very nervous when Zach was coming to Atlanta because there were a lot of triggers in Atlanta for him. He had 7 months. At that time, he came home for Christmas on the 23rd of December. He had met a girl in AA. She had 2 months, and anybody that's ever worked a 12-step program, knows that somebody with 2 months and somebody with 7 months have no business trying to get into a relationship, but it's hard to tell teenagers anything really, or 20-year-olds anything. So they didn't really want to listen to my 2 cents on that. So he came home for Christmas and on the 23rd, and he went back on the 27th, and he did great while he was in Atlanta. And on the 28th of December 2010, Zach relapsed with that girl up in Tennessee. And it took me a little while to figure it out because long distance, we used to talk all the time. He was my only child. My husband, Zach's father, died when Zach was 4 of cancer. And so it was really just the 2 of us his whole life. So anyway, he relapsed. I was trying to figure out what was going on. I kept saying to him, "Are you using?" I could usually tell by his voice, and I kept saying, "Are you using?" And he kept gaslighting me, saying, "No, I'm fine." Well, anyway, I finally figured out he had moved up to Knoxville to this girl's grandmother's house, and I went up and got him, and she went to treatment. And I'm a person in recovery. I did not know what to do. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know, should he go back to where he went? Should he go somewhere different? He was willing, I was willing, but I just didn't know what the next step should be for him, and neither did he. So my in-laws said, why don't you let him move down with us in Noonan, Georgia, and he can stay with us for a little while we figure it out. So he moved down there mid-March 2011, and kind of grandparents' rules, which aren't that different from mine, which was, get a job, no car, AA meeting every day, get a sponsor, and church on Sunday, Sunday school after church, all that. So he was doing that, complying, and he loved them, getting along great with them, and he seemed to be doing okay, although I could tell he was struggling a little bit. So anyway, on the night of April 30th, 2011, Zach went to work. He had a job waiting tables, and my father-in-law picked him up from work just after 10, got home at 10:30, and he sat with his grandparents from 10:30 to 11 and talked, and then they went to bed. And at 11:01, he called his AA sponsor and talked to his AA sponsor for 30 minutes. At 11:31, he called that girl in Tennessee that he was still really just yearning for her, and she didn't answer. And at 11:33, he called the heroin dealer in Atlanta. He did not have a car. My in-laws left the keys out, which I don't blame them at all. I mean, it just was one of those things, and that they just left the keys accessible. He had never taken them before, but he left. And the next morning, about 9 o'clock, I got a call from my father-in-law, and he just said, Zach has taken the keys, taken my car. We don't know where he is. So I started calling him, and I was furious. I was so mad because I knew my in-laws were so mad. So I was calling him, no answer. He wouldn't pick up. So I started texting him, no answer. And finally, I just sent him the text that I had sent him a few times before. And whenever I sent him this text, he always answered me every time. And I just said, Zach, I'm scared. And I got nothing. So I just started praying that my son was in jail. And I can tell you, I never thought I would be a parent that would pray that their child was in jail. But I knew that was the only other reason
why he wouldn't be responding to my text. So I was praying, God, please let my son be in jail. But at 3 o'clock on the afternoon of May 1st, 2011, I got a call from my father-in-law that they had found his body in the back seat of his grandparents' car in the English Avenue neighborhood of Atlanta, called, that some people still call the Bluff. He died of a heroin overdose. He was 21 years old. So, you know, we just started doing what people do when they lose somebody that they love. We started planning the services, and all of his friends, it was May, they were finishing their finals in their junior year in college. And so we put off the service till the end of the week so they could be finished with their finals. And they flew in from all over the country, from Boston and Nashville and everywhere, and Virginia and Michigan, and to come to his funeral and say goodbye to Zach and to help me. They were all kids that I had known for their whole lives too. You know, he had gone to the same school from when he was kindergarten. So we buried him in Arlington Cemetery in Sandy Springs on May 7th, 2011. And you know, and when I tell this story, Lori knows, I always say, I don't know why things happened the way they did. It's like dominoes falling. But the very next day, I got up and I went and picked up the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, out of my driveway. And on the front page, there was an article about 3 kids who had just died of heroin overdoses in Milton, Georgia, which is an Atlanta suburb, as many of you may know. And, you know, back then, it was a very lonely place to be. You weren't hearing about this on the news. It wasn't on the television every night. You didn't know about other people whose kids were going through this. So it was so lonely to be a parent that was experiencing this. And to see that article, while I certainly wasn't happy for those people, I felt less alone. So I wrote an email to the reporter, and I don't know why. I've never done that before in my life. And I just told her about my son. I just told her about Zach. And she sent me a very nice email back and just said, you know, she was sorry. And that was kind of it. That was, you know, early May. And then in August, I got a call from that reporter, and she said, I'm heading down to the English Avenue neighborhood of Atlanta where your son died to do an article on the Atlanta Harm Reduction Coalition. And she said, I thought you might want to tag along. And honestly, I'd never heard of harm reduction. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. I didn't know how I could help in any way, except I was just looking for a reason to get out of bed because I was really struggling. I was really deep in my grief. And so she came and picked me up, and we went down to Atlanta Harm Reduction Coalition. I met Mona Bennett, who was running the group at that time. And I went on outreach with them, and I learned a little bit about harm reduction. And the article came out in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on it was Labor Day weekend, 2011. And it's a picture of me holding Zach's picture down in the area where he died, and a nice article, a little bit about us and mostly about Atlanta Harm and what they were doing and all that. So again, that was kind of it. Just, you know, trying to get on with my life. And fast forward to the following spring of 2012, and I get a call from Mona Bennett at the Atlanta Harm Reduction Coalition. And she said, a couple of people have lost a friend of theirs, Nick. Their names are Tori Miller and Jeremy Galloway, and they are want to try to get a Good Samaritan law passed in the state of Georgia. She said, I thought you might want to try to help. So again, I was like, you know, I don't know what a Good Samaritan law is. I don't have any idea how to get a law passed anywhere, let alone in the state of Georgia. But I thought, you know, I'm looking for something. And so I said, fine, I'll meet you. So I met Mona and Jeremy and Tori in Midtown in April. I mean, not in April, in 2000 or spring of 2012. I don't remember the date, to be honest. And, you know, we all started kind of talking about how do you get a law passed in Georgia. And we were so clueless. I mean, honestly, I always affectionately just describe us as the 4 idiots, because we were like, duh, I wonder how you get a law passed. And I think we met twice, and we were kind of talking about a few things, and then enter my friend Lori.
Hi, so I'm Laurie Fugit, and I am a nurse. And in 2012, I was just working at the hospital, raising 2 daughters, living in the suburbs. And then my friends' sons started overdosing, and I started hearing about it. And I was just shocked. I really had never had any of my friends, go through that or know anybody personally that had gone through that. And one of my friends lost her son, Susan. And I just did what I knew to do, which in the South, we cook casseroles and we, give hugs and things like that. But I didn't know there was anything else I could do. And then a couple of months later, it hit my street, and my friend who lives at the bottom of my cul-de-sac, her son was going to Walton High School and using anything he could get his hands on. And my friend was scared to death that he was gonna get a hold of something bad. And so I just started trying to make a plan in my head, because when you're a nurse and your neighbors know you're a nurse, they call you before they call 911, whether it's for themselves, a family member, or their pets. They call the neighborhood nurse. And so I just wanted to have a plan. And in case I got that phone call in the middle of the night, and she was saying, Drew's not breathing, Drew's not breathing. So all I knew to do at that point was I could run down the road and do CPR. But I did know about naloxone, because we had it on our floor in the hospital. Any floor with surgical patients has naloxone, in case you walk in the room and because of pain meds or anesthesia that might be opioid based, they may not be breathing like you want them to breathe. So you can just run in the med room, grab Narcan, run in the room and pop it in their line or give them a shot. And so I knew about it, but I didn't know how to get it for myself. I decided I wanted 2 vials of naloxone and 2 intramuscular syringes. So if my friend called me in the middle of the night, I could just grab that, run down the street and give him a shot of that, and hopefully reverse the respiratory depression that an opioid overdose can cause. And back then in 2012, I couldn't go to my doctor and ask him to write me a script, because they would just look at me like I was crazy. I couldn't, get it from a retail pharmacy. It pretty much was just in hospital ERs, on ambulances, maybe, and, in surgical suites. So I did what I always do when I don't know something. I looked it up on my phone, and I don't remember what I put in, Narcan near me or something, I don't know. But what came up, I thought an address was going to come up, because, being a suburban mom, I had heard that kids could get drugs through the internet. And so I thought, well, maybe I can get the anti-drug through the internet. So I thought some address was going to come up in China or somewhere. But instead, what came up was this guy's name over and over. Every little story that came up had this guy's name in it. Robert Childs, Robert Childs, Robert Childs, Robert Childs. So I started reading the little stories, and it turned out Robert Childs ran something called the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. I had no idea what a harm reduction coalition was or what harm reduction was at that point, but it seemed to me from reading all those stories that he knew how to get his hands on some naloxone. So I decided he was going to be my new best friend. And so I read until I found his phone number, and I called him and just said, you don't know me. I'm just a little nurse from Marietta, Georgia, but I'm really worried about this kid on my street. And I want to get some naloxone just in case, he has a medical emergency involving opioids. And Robert said, so you're in Marietta? And I said, mm-hmm. And he said, well, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I was like, oh, I used to live in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I knew that was a really, really long drive. And I was just thinking to myself, oh, please don't make me drive all the way to Raleigh. And before I could even say anything, he said, I will bring it to you next week. And I was like, what? And he said, I'll bring it down next week. And I thought, who is this weirdo? Because who would drive 12 to 14 hours to take 2 vials, you know, a free naloxone to somebody they don't even know. So I totally didn't trust him, and I wasn't going to let him come to my house because I was weird like that. I hope I'm better now. But I met him at a grocery store in Sandy Springs, about 15 miles away from my home. And he spent 3 hours teaching me and telling me all about what they were doing in North Carolina and explaining the little rescue kit that he gave to me. And part of what he mentioned was that North Carolina was trying to get a law passed that would allow community access to naloxone. And for some reason, that just really grabbed me. Like, I'd never really been grabbed by a cause before, but he told me that there were only 10 states at that time that had naloxone access law. And I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have that in Georgia, do we? And he said, no, you don't. And I said, well, why not? Why don't we have that law in Georgia so people who know someone at risk can have this product and probably sleep a heck of a lot better at night, knowing that they have a tool, you know, that could possibly save their loved ones. And Robert just looked at me dead in the eye and said, I don't know, Laurie, why don't you have this law in Georgia? And then he just stared at me and he didn't say anything else. And I was like, oh, okay. So I said, what do I do? And he said, you need to get in touch with Mona Bennett. She runs the Atlanta Harm Reduction Coalition. And I was like, oh, we have one of those? And he was like, yes, Laurie, you have one. I'm sure he just thought I was so stupid, but he didn't say that. He was very gracious. And he said, she's not involved in this. He didn't even know Mona had already met twice with Robin and Tori and Jeremy. But Robert said she'd be really interested and she'd want to help you. So give her a call. So I called Mona, and she was surprised to hear from, you know, a suburban mom wanting to get this done, but she invited me to come to their next meeting. And so I, in turn, invited my friend who had lost her son to an overdose, Susan Calamay. She lost her son, Sean Lanham. And Susan also is a UGA grad, by the way, just like me. And Susan said she would definitely drive us down to the meeting because she worked in Atlanta. She knew all the roads and everything. And she did that. So that is how I became idiot number 5, and Susan became idiot number 6.
So there we are in Midtown, the 6 of us talking about how to get a law passed. And, you know, honestly, we were pretty clueless. But I had talked to somebody in the legislator, an aide in one of the legislature's office, and he said the very first thing you need to do is you need to get a sponsor, and that's the same thing Robert Childs had told us, and they both pretty much said to us, and it needs to be a Republican. They said, the guy that I talked to said, look, the Democrats are going to be easy to get on board on this. The Republicans are going to dig their heels in. They're going to say, no way. So, but if you have a Republican sponsor, the Republican sponsor can help grease the wheels with the other Republicans. You have a better chance of getting your law passed. He also, by the way, told me it'll take you at least 4 years because Georgia is not usually on the leading edge of this kind of legislation. And at that point, you know, as Lori said, like 10, 12 states had passed it. I mean, you know, good luck. We were like usually number 48 or something. So anyway, we started talking about, okay, who can be our sponsor? How can we, you know, who we started throwing names out. And then Lori said, how about my representative? Her name is Sharon Cooper. She's a nurse. She's the chairperson of the Health and Human Services Committee on the House side. I live in her district, and she's a Republican. And we were like, wow, that sounds perfect. Okay, let's put her at the top of our list and, you know, see what we can do with that. So in the meantime, one of my son Zach's best friends for his whole life, really until they kind of their paths diverged when they were about 16, but one of his best friends really his whole life, and kid I knew forever, was a 1L, a first-year law student, and that he was doing a internship at the Capitol. So I thought, oh gosh, I'm just going to call Justin. His name's Justin Leaf. I thought I'm just going to call Justin and ask him if there's any way he'll help us because we're fairly clueless. So I called Justin. and said, would you be interested in doing this in Zach's memory? And he said, absolutely, Ms. Elliott. And I said, well, what are you doing at the Capitol anyway? And he said, I'm interning for Sharon Cooper, the chairperson of the Health and Human Services Committee. And we were like, really? Just couldn't believe it. So Justin got us an invitation to Sharon's home. She had us to her house in the fall of 2013. I guess there were 7 or 8 of us, all who had, lost people that we knew and loved. She sat in her 70s. She sat on her brick hearth for 3 hours while we sat on her cushy sofas, and we told her about our family members and our friends, our loved ones. Of course, I told her about Zach, and Susan told about Sean. Robin Cardejas told about her son, Stephen, who had been driven around in the backseat of a car for 3 hours with his friends while he was overdosing. They were just kept thinking, he's going to snap out of it. He's going to snap out of it. They were too afraid to call 911. They drove past the emergency room. They didn't know what to do. And Stephen died in the backseat. And then they got to call his mom and tell her that. Diane Brannon told about her son, Randall, who died in the presence of his friends. And when she arrived back from church on a Sunday morning, she found his body lying on the front lawn because that's where his friends had dumped him. Another parent told about her daughter, who the people that she was with did the right thing. They called 911 despite the potential consequences. And the ambulance arrived, and there was no Narcan, no naloxone on the ambulance. So by the time they put her in the back of the ambulance and got her to the emergency room, she was dead. And another parent told about their child, same story. Ambulance came. They had naloxone on the ambulance, but at that time there was a hierarchy with regard to what level what level you had to be in order to administer it. And there was no one on the ambulance that was that level. So even though they had naloxone, they couldn't administer it. They put her in the back of the ambulance and drove her to the hospital. And when she got there, she was dead. So by the time we finished telling Sharon our stories, she agreed to sponsor our bill. She said, we're going to take it forward in the 2014 session, which was starting in, a month or 2. And she said, we need to get busy. So you all may already know this. We didn't. As I said, we didn't know what the session's 40 days. I mean, there are 365 days in the year. There are 40 days that they're voting, 40 work days that they're voting on bills in the legislature. So you don't have a lot of time to get your story across. So the session started early January 2014, and we made schedules and plans, and our group just kept expanding. There had been other people that were working on this at the same time we were, but we didn't know that. And then we all combined forces, and we would go down to the Capitol every day. We all have full-time jobs. I mean, we all work for a living, but we were scheduling around it. And I would say, I'll be there from 8 to 12. And somebody else would say, I can be there from 1 to 5. And we'd stand in the lobby of the Capitol like this with the pictures of our children's faces. And we would pretty much just accost anybody that came in the front door and try to tell them about our law and about our child in a 2-minute elevator speech to try to get them on our side. And at the beginning, we didn't know what we were doing, but we got better. We worked the ropes. We testified at subcommittees. We went to legislators' offices. Justin was kind of shepherding us through the process, and Robert Childs was coaching us from afar. And Justin would say, the senators are getting out of room 302 at 2:30, and we'd scurry up to room 302 with the pictures of our kids, and we'd wait for the senators to come out so we could tell them our story. So the bill went to the House first, and it had to go to the House, then it had to go to the Senate. So it went to the House first, and they voted on it. And that's, of course, where Sharon Cooper worked. They voted on it, and it passed. So we were shocked, but happy. But then it had to go over to the Senate. So it went to the Senate. And when the bill was in the Senate, the senator from Athens, Senator Cowsert, decided that he wanted to change our bill and add something to it. It was a good thing. It was something we had originally had in there, but they had stripped out of it. And I'll tell you what that was later, but he added that on. And so the amended bill was then voted on in the Senate, and it passed. But now it had to go back to the House because it was a different bill. And what happens frequently is you're out of 40 days. Like before it can get back to the house, you've run out of time. So we were just pressing and pushing so hard to make sure that the bill got called to the floor before the 40 days was up. We were down there on the 39th day. And those days, the legislators work really long hours. So we were down there from about 8 in the morning and working and talking to people and trying to make sure the bill was going to get called to the floor. And at about 8:30 that night, we were all sitting in the gallery and they called our bill to the floor to be revoted on in the House, and we saw the green lights go up, and we realized that we had just passed the Georgia 911 medical amnesty and expanded naloxone access bill in the state of Georgia. So, very, very, very happy, bittersweet for many of us because we knew that wasn't going to change the outcome for our children, but we knew that it was going to change the outcome for a lot of other people. So we were honored to stand with Governor Deal on April 24th, 2014, when he signed the bill into law. 20 people are allowed in the room when he does the bill signing, and everyone that was in the room had lost someone that they knew and loved to overdose. So, we kind of thought, wow, yay, we're done. We did it. We knew there were still some things we were going to do after that, but 5 days later, we heard about a kid that overdosed and he was in the presence of his friends and they didn't call 911. And that just broke my heart. And then we realized that it wasn't enough to pass the law. Really, people have to know about the law. Like we have to go out and educate people and tell them about it, make sure people know about it. So what we do now, we are strictly volunteers. We all still have real jobs, doing things. And we're strictly a volunteer group. We go out and we educate people in the state of Georgia on the Georgia 911 medical amnesty law, and we distribute naloxone throughout the state. And Lori will talk in detail about that in a minute. So let me tell you quickly what the law says. The first part says there's two essential parts to it. The first part is don't run, call 911. What that says is that if you're in the presence of someone with having a suspected overdose, you can call 911, you have to stay with the victim until help arrives. And that's really imperative. You stay with the victim until help arrives. And neither the caller nor the victim can be arrested, charged, or prosecuted in the state of Georgia for personal use quantities of drugs, for paraphernalia. They can't be violated on probation or on parole, or if they have conditions to pretrial release. The part that Senator Cowsert wanted to add back into the bill was that this also applies to underage drinking. So it's really important, especially for people, I think, in high school and colleges and for the family members of those people, to know that if there's a medical emergency as a result of alcohol and people are underage and they're afraid to call 911 because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble, that neither the caller nor the victim, as long as the caller stays with the victim until help arrives, neither the caller nor the victim can be arrested, charged, or prosecuted in the state of Georgia. I'm going to pass it over to Lori, and she's going to tell you the other part of the law. She'll tell you what the personal use quantities are and about Narcan.
Hi, y'all. So when we got our law written, we really wanted it to benefit people who were most at risk, not just recreational users. And so we put in the amounts as large as we thought we could get passed. North Carolina had managed to get these amounts passed. These amounts are not trafficking amounts because nobody in our group wants to pass a law that's going to protect people who are actually trafficking large amounts of drugs. But we do want to help people who have substance use disorder and who are overdosing. So what our law says is that if you have less than 4 grams of a solid substance, less than 4 grams of a solid substance mixed in a secondary medium where the combined weight is less than 4 grams, less than an ounce of marijuana, or less than 1 milliliter of liquid, like say in a syringe or a cooker or a spoon, you get immunity. Our law also says that people cannot be violated on probation, parole, or if they have conditions for pretrial release, but our law does not protect people who may have warrants out for their arrest. So we suggest, if you know someone and they're with a group of people and there are people there who have warrants, those people might want to leave, and people who don't have warrants might want to be the ones who are going to call 911 and stay at the scene. Okay. Our law also says now that any doctor can prescribe naloxone, any pharmacist can dispense it, and any person who knows a person at risk can obtain it. Everybody can give it, and everybody's protected from civil liabilities, criminal liabilities, and professional licensing liabilities for doing so. So there's no reason not to get involved if you suspect someone is having an overdose and you have access to naloxone. Our law is written, it says you're protected if you suspected an overdose and intervened in good faith. It doesn't say they had an overdose. So if you intervene and someone, it turns out, didn't have an overdose, but maybe they'd had a heart attack when you came upon them, or were in a diabetic coma or whatever, you're still protected legally. We also, of course, did away with that ridiculous hierarchy on the ambulance rule, so that's not in effect anymore. We wanted law enforcement to be able to carry naloxone because, especially in rural areas of Georgia, sometimes law enforcement is the first to arrive when a 911 call is placed before the EMS units. So we got that passed. There's currently, that I know about, 223 police and sheriff departments and college security departments that are equipped and are carrying naloxone, and they've done hundreds of reversals. We also, when we passed our law, we wanted it to benefit us. So we consider ourselves now a harm reduction organization, which is a little ironic since we didn't even know what that was when we got started on this. So our law says that a harm reduction organization acting under a standing order from a physician may train and dispense naloxone to people. So that's how we do what we do legally. So how does naloxone work in your body? Well, we all of us have receptors on cells in our central nervous system. So in our brain, in our spinal cord, and actually even in our gastrointestinal tract, we have cells with receptors that are opioid receptors. So they're receptors that are sitting there waiting for an opioid or an opioid-like substance to come into your body, and it'll attach to those receptors. And then certain chemical actions will happen, chemicals will be released, and then you'll feel euphoria and warmth and things like that. So what happens in an overdose is that when a person has too much opioids in their body, they'll attach, the molecules of the opioids will attach to those receptors, and it causes those chemicals to be released, dopamine and other things, so that the person is feeling good, but at the same time, it's doing something bad. And what it's doing bad is that opioids are in a class of medication called respiratory depressants. And so it is causing someone to breathe fewer and fewer times per minute, and each breath is more and more and more shallow. So the person is getting not enough oxygen into their bloodstream. They become hypoxic. They're not getting enough oxygen. And eventually, if that's left untreated, it just spirals down the drain to a bad outcome. But those receptors actually prefer naloxone over opioids for a certain amount of time. So, and naloxone is chemically, it's similar to an opioid, so that's why it attracts those receptors. And so if you can get naloxone into a person's body who's overdosing, the molecules of Narcan, naloxone, will come in and they'll just rip off those opioid molecules from the drug, and it'll take its place. It'll sit on those receptors. And that's all it does, because naloxone is not a respiratory depressant. So that's when you'll see, maybe you've seen it in person, maybe you've seen it on a TV show, but you'll see a person who looks dead. I mean, their color is horrible. Their face, because they've overdosed, may look bluish, purplish, or if they're white like me, if they're a darker complected person, they're going to look grayish or ashen color. Their lips may look blue. Their nail beds may look blue. They may not be breathing at all. If you feel for a pulse, it may be really, really slow and erratic, or they may not have a pulse at all, or they could be gasping or making a noise that sounds like a snoring noise. It's not really snoring, it's part of the dying process, but a lot of people mistake that as snoring. So you may see a person that looks like that has some of those symptoms, and then you see, like on a TV show, somebody gives them Narcan, and within like a minute or two, most times they pop up, they start asking questions. That's because those opioid molecules have been ripped off those cell receptors, and Narcan has taken its place, and their respiratory urge is no longer being suppressed. So that's what happens. But there's another thing that happens when those molecules are ripped off of the opioid receptors. It throws the person into a precipitated withdrawal. So they don't feel withdrawal symptoms like slowly and over an extended period of time. They feel it all at once. It hits them like a freight train. So they feel really, really, really badly. They say it's like the flu times a million. So nobody that's been Narcaned wants to be Narcaned again, because it really makes them feel really, really sick. But it allows them to breathe. So that's the trade-off. So what do you do if you see a person and they've got those signs and symptoms I just mentioned, the color, lack of breathing, or just breathing a few times a minute, gasping, maybe no heartbeat or a slow heartbeat? What do you do? Well, the important thing is what you do, you want to do it quickly. So we do not teach for you to do a full head to toe assessment looking for all those things I just mentioned. We want you to act really quickly, because time is tissue. And the longer this person goes without oxygen, the more cells throughout their body are dying. And I know a lot of people who have lost eyesight because those were the cells that died in an overdose before somebody got oxygen back into them. Heart muscle, frequently in young men, they're 25 years old, but their heart is of a 75-year-old because of the damage that's been done. I have a friend who had to get her leg amputated because that's where the cells that died in her were. So it's really, really important to act quickly. So we just want you to check for one thing, and that one thing is unresponsiveness. So the way you check for unresponsiveness is you do what I call the 3 S's. Number 1, you grab their shoulder and you shake it hard, okay? So you're touching them. You're seeing if they're reacting to your touch. Number 2 is you get up in their face at the same time you're shaking their shoulder, and you shout at them and you say, hey, wake up. Are you okay? Are you okay? If you know their name, shout their name. And then the third thing you're going to do is you're going to do a sternal rub. So you take your knuckles and you rub really hard up and down the breastbone, the sternum, because that's very, very painful. And if they haven't responded to your touch and the sound of your voice, you're going to see if they respond to pain. And so you do the sternal rub. And if they don't respond to the sternal rub, then you're going to give them some Narcan. So you want to get them down on their back on a hard, flat surface. Never, 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 never leave a person overdosing on a soft surface like a bed or a couch or the back seat of a car, because later on, EMS may have you over the telephone, the 911 operator may have you doing chest compressions, and chest compressions do not work effectively if there is a soft surface behind someone's back. You're trying to trap the heart between a hard surface and you pressing down. So you want to get them on a hard surface. Normally that's the ground. So pull them down on the ground on their back and then tilt their head back. Very, very important. You do that for 3 reasons. Number one, it opens up the airway because a lot of times people are kind of crunched down when they've overdosed. Number two, it lets you look in their mouth. And that step is not on most of the teaching that's online. It's not even on this box of Narcan nasal that opens up to tell you what to do. They don't include this step. But it's really important. And the Medical Association of Georgia now, they include it because I've talked to them and they agreed that it's very important. So you've got that head tilted back to open the airway, pull their chin down. And sometimes that's hard to do because sometimes people will clamp their jaw shut when they're overdosing, but try to pull their chin down, look in their mouth. The mouth is a deep, dark hole. So whip out your nifty cell phone and use that little flashlight app to look in the mouth and see if there's any foreign objects in there, because what may be in there could kill them if you don't remove it. So you look in there and you see if there's any pills in there, because the pills can still dissolve and, you know, cause more narcotics to be dumped into their system. There may be a syringe cap, because a lot of people, when they inject intravenously, they'll pull the syringe cap like this off with their teeth. And then when they overdose, it falls back in their throat. And another thing people do is they will take fentanyl patches. They're like little film, plastic type little film squares, and it's got fentanyl and like a gel matrix on there. It normally is put on people's body for intractable pain, like bone cancer pain, but people will get them that have already been used but not discarded properly, and they will cheek them. They'll put them inside their cheek to try to get the last little bit of medication off of there, or they'll cut them into smaller squares and put it under the tongue. So look, and if that's there, remove it before you spray the Narcan up their nose or give them a shot if that's the kind you have. Because when you give the Narcan, if it can work, it's going to cause them to inhale, and you don't want them to inhale anything down their throat and choke. Okay, so you've done that, you've looked in their mouth, and the third step, and the reason why this head has to be tilted back is because of this medication. If you're given the Narcan nasal spray, it is a nasal spray that works by sitting inside the nose and being absorbed by the tiny little blood vessels that are in your nasal mucosa and your nasal tissue. It doesn't work by you spraying it and them going, because they're not breathing. So you got to keep the head tilted back so that you can put it up the nostril as far as it'll go, and then you depress the plunger with your thumb. It's like a hot red plunger on this, and you spray it up the nose. Okay, then and only then do you get your cell phone again and call 911. It is much, much, much more important to go ahead and get this on board and then call 911 than to do it the other way around. It used to be the other way, but Harm Reduction International thought that through and changed the process. So you're going to call 911, put your phone on speaker, and tell them your address, where you are inside that address, just so they can get to you faster, and that you suspected an overdose, and you gave 1 dose of whatever kind of Narcan you have. And then they're going to have you feel for a pulse and watch the person's chest rise and fall. And usually they tell you to say a word when you feel the pulse or when you see the chest rise. And based on that, the 911 operator will instruct you in what to do next, whether it's doing chest compressions only, if it's doing rescue breathing only, or if it's doing both, or even doing neither. If you got there really quickly, they may just have you turn the patient on their side in a recovery position. But you do whatever 911 tells you to do for that client for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, look at your patient and reassess them. Are they improving? And by improving, I mean, are they becoming responsive? Because you decided they weren't responsive. Excuse me. So is their color improving? Are they starting to wake up and ask you what happened? That type thing. So if they seem to be improving to you, you're going to turn them on their left side, whichever looks like an L to you, turn them on their left side in a recovery position. And that there's a picture of that inside that little box I just showed you in that front flap. But if they're not improving, you open your box again, because there's 2 doses of Narcan in every Narcan product that you would get. Get the second dose out. You're going to put it up the other side of the nose that you haven't used, because it's going to be more dry and more absorbent. You're going to spray it, and then you're going to tell 911 operator, I've given a second dose of Narcan nasal spray. Continue doing this for 2 minutes. You can redose every 2 minutes for as many doses as you have until the patient becomes responsive, or until 911 EMS runs into the door to take over for you. And one thing I want to mention, when you're getting ready to give this nasal spray, don't test it like you might do a home nasal spray. You might prime it. It is ready to go. When you take it out of this little blister pack that it comes in, it is ready to use. There's no cap. You don't prime it, okay? It's ready to go. And then hopefully EMS is going to show up, and the person's going to go off with EMS to the hospital and get some more care. But if the person refuses transport, and a lot of people will refuse transport once EMS arrives, then you need to stay with them for, I tell people 6 to 8 hours, because Narcan only lasts 30 to 90 minutes. So after 30 to 90 minutes, the Narcan molecules just kind of wear off and float away. And in the bloodstream, there's oftentimes enough opioid molecules to reattach to those receptors, and the person can go back into their overdose without taking any more medication. So you need to teach people to stay with their friends for an extended amount of time if they don't accept medical transport. Some other things to remember: there is an expiration date on each naloxone product. In fact, on this one, the FDA just ruled about 2 weeks ago that they were extending it by 12 months. So it used to have an expiration date of about 2 years, and the next new product that comes out, you'll see it's going to be closer to 36 months. Research shows that it actually lasts much, much, much longer than that, and still meets USP requirements for, being 90% or greater in the container of naloxone after extended number of years. But that's what's stamped on the box. There's temperature suggestions on the box too, but what we teach people is keep it where it's most likely to be used, because it's not going to do anybody any good if you keep it at home in your medicine cabinet, but you're gone all day. So if you need to keep it in your pocketbook or in your glove box, then keep it there. They've done a lot of research on temperature ranges, -4 to 176 degrees. It did fine with that. They froze it after it thawed. It was fine. It's a very, very hardy medication. So keep it where it's most likely to be used. Now, it does just work on opiates and opioids like heroin, fentanyl, all the fentanyl analogs. It'll work on, Percocet, oxys, Dilaudid, morphine, codeine, Opana, there's a lot of opiates and opioids out there. But in Georgia now, everything on the street except pot has been found to have fentanyl in it. Even anabolic steroids. We lost a young man in Athens who was in recovery because he bought street anabolic steroids that had fentanyl in it. Methamphetamine, lots of fentanyl in the meth now. Cocaine. We lost a surgeon from my hospital and his girlfriend. They were doing cocaine. It had fentanyl in it. Counterfeit pills. They look just like Percocets or just like Xanax. They've got fentanyl in it. There's even something stronger out there now, more potent than fentanyl, called ISO. It's a much longer word, but we just all call it ISO. It's a synthetic opioid, but it does respond to naloxone. So we tell people, regardless of what someone says a victim used, give them Narcan, because it's not going to hurt them and it might just save their life. And I told you can redose every 2 minutes, and remember, it only lasts 30 to 90 minutes. So people reach out to us through our website, and I put our website address at the very beginning of this chat column. So if you need a rescue kit because you know someone at high risk and you are in a position to intervene, that address is up there. There's a form on our website you can fill out, and we will send you a kit. However, if you want one just because, in case, then please go to your local pharmacy, support them, use your insurance. Many insurances help cover the cost of naloxone. But we also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. So people reach out to us. I've trained 85 distributors across the state, and we match them up with requests that come in. And we either now during COVID, if the trainer that we have, our volunteers, if they want to go out and do an in-person training, then they do that with the person who writes us. But if they don't, and some of us still are not doing face-to-face trainings because we're in high-risk categories, then we just mail kits. So we've mailed out now since 2014. We are closing in on about 60,000 kits of Narcan. So that's 120,000 doses of Narcan. And we have on our product, this is actually a sticker of ours that we put on the front of the Narcan box, because it normally looks like that. And on the sticker, we tell people to reach out to us if they use our kit for an overdose, because quite frankly, keeping up with that reversal of an overdose helps us get more money from the state of Georgia in grants so that we can buy more naloxone, we get it at a discount, and then we give it away. So we want to know about reversals, but more importantly, we want to replace that kit if somebody has used that kit for a reversal. And so that's how people get in touch with us. And so just from the ones who have taken the time to get in touch with us, we know that our kits, along with our partner, we do partner with Atlanta Harm Reduction Coalition, who is located down in the English Avenue, Vine City area of Atlanta, which is a very high-risk area. They distribute down there. We do the entire rest of the state as volunteers. And we know that our kits have saved 3,075 lives from fatal overdoses. And we feel like that's an underreported number, because Robin and I joke that most people at the scene of an overdose don't go, oh, let's get in touch with Laurie and Robin. So we're pretty sure that's an underreported number, but that's just what we do. We're very narrowly focused. We just teach people on our law and train people on naloxone and give it out. And we're just hoping that we keep people alive. I mean, we would love it if everybody that we, had a part in their reversal with a kit, if they decided to get into recovery. But that's not a requirement from us, because number one, we just want to keep them breathing, because every person is valuable and is important to their own friends and their own families. So that is our goal now, is to just keep people alive. And I'm going to turn it back over to Robin to wrap it up.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, our tagline is where there's life, there's hope. So I think I saw some questions in the chat box, and I think I answered a couple of them. If there's any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them. I think we do have a few minutes left. Anybody?
Sarah, do we want to unmute them or have them use the text box, which is better for you?
For the students,
Yes.
probably let's use the chat box. That way, if we have multiple people who have questions, we can field them a little bit easier.
I see one of the questions relates to the personal use quantities. Was that question answered for everybody? I know Lori addressed it. I just want to make sure everybody got that answer. And the pricing.
I think, Robin, one of the other things to sort of talk about is, and you guys really pointed this out, and I really want to say it again, is it may not be the ultimate user of the narcotic that needs the naloxone. It might be their loved one or someone in their life.
Oh yeah.
Very much so, because you can't administer it to yourself. I mean, you can't, so I mean, if you can administer it to yourself, you probably don't need it. You can administer it to yourself, but if you can, you probably don't need it. So primarily it's going to be used by peers, family members, other people that are in the presence of someone that's overdosing.
I want to make sure, like, if someone's at their primary care office and it's a grandmother or a spouse or whatever, and they're asking for naloxone, it may not be because they have an issue. It's just they've seen this and they're thinking ahead. And we need to broaden our thought process about accessibility when it comes to pharmacists and prescribers and those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And it's not only that, like, we think even people that are prescribed opioids, any kind of opiate-based drug should also have Narcan, because we know people that were using medication as prescribed that wound up overdosing and were reversed with Narcan. So, I mean, it's very important that it's not just people that are have substance use disorder or, quote, abusing drugs. Sometimes people are just using them. Everybody that has an opiate should have Narcan.
So Robin, you don't know this, but you just beautifully gave them a heads up to a part of the case that they're going to walk into in just a second.
Oh.
While the case that they're going to deal with is not someone that necessarily is imminently looking at as an overdose victim, but they are someone that would be what we'll call higher risk. And so access to naloxone, it's a little bit more subtle in their case. So whether you know it or not, you just teed them up beautifully to go.
Oh, good. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, and another thing too is if anyone has prescribed opiates in their home, you never know when, a grandchild, a teenager, or even a young child, could get into it, and you may need that Narcan just because of an accident too. So
I think that's a wonderful point. Are there any other questions for Robin and Lori? I'm kind of checking the chat box. People are asking questions about insurance companies and access, and people are answering them. So we have one big team here, guys, helping while you guys talk, answer the questions. So if you see anything, please feel free to jump in.
I will say this, I see on the chat where it says in-home medicine safes are a great source of primary prevention. Totally agree with that. Just make sure you don't put the Narcan in there.
Very good point. Also, for those,
okay.
I think National Pharmacy Take Back Day is October 24th this year. So for people that have narcotics in their home that are no longer being used, clean out the medicine cabinets, because, grandkids sometimes find their playthings at home. So they might be looking through medicine cabinets. So it's a big deal for people to get rid of the medications in their medicine cabinets, as you guys talked about, sort of taking away that diversion aspect where they can steal it from the medicine cabinets of their neighbors, friends, grandparents, whatever. Yeah.
Somebody said something about wondering if insurance companies can access medication lists of subscribers to use a naloxone prescription in some discriminatory manner. I think several years ago, I think that was more of a worry, because now naloxone is just so almost universally accepted as, needed by people for a variety of reasons, not just for substance use disorder. But I heard of a case where someone had a very, very small insurance company that was, trying to discriminate against them because of that. But to my knowledge, they actually got that reversed. So I really don't think it's as much of an issue now as it perhaps was a few years ago. Just like a few years ago, it was hard for us to get legislators to even talk to us. We were advised not to even say the words harm reduction when we walked in the Capitol, because we were told they'll just shut you off, and now they're coming to us like, what can we do in a harm reduction manner to better protect our constituents? It's really been a big change. The stigma around the Naxolone has gotten better as far as harm reduction itself. People see harm reduction as a viable part of, keeping people healthier. So.
And I think there was one, we'll leave with two questions here just really quickly. Emma is asking about intending to expand the protection of amnesty law to cover the higher amounts of drugs. I think that would be on someone when they are discovered, if you will, more than 4
Anything
grams.
above 4 grams in Georgia is considered trafficking. So I don't really think we are probably going to be able to get trafficking amounts changed. So we bumped right up to the edge of the trafficking amounts. So
I mean, really, the amounts are not small amounts with regard to what would be considered personal use quantities. They're really generous, actually.
And a lot of times now we hear stories from people that call 911 and there's drugs at the scene. And some people have reached out to us because they were saying, I was so scared because, I was worried I was going to, get arrested. And they said the police just came over to them and, they said, look, there's needles and syringes and spoons and da-da-da. And the cops are like, just throw it away.
We don't care. Like really the whole, everything's just changing in a very positive way.
I'm going to stop right there for a moment, and I'm going to say thank you once again. I know people cannot do a virtual clap or applause on here, but it just is incredible to have Robin and Lori join us and take time out of their day. They're being pulled several different directions to give this talk, and they made time for us. So for the students and the faculty on board, please let them know that you appreciate it with exactly what you're doing right now. Send them an icon and let them know.
Thank you all so much.
We really appreciate it. Your stories always touch my heart, but also your passion for this makes me just want to get up and do something. So I really appreciate you pushing all of us to look beyond. For everyone on right now, if you guys could do me a favor, you're going to leave this room. Listen to me. You're going to leave this meeting and you're going to click your second link in your emails. We're working currently for some of the students who did not get a link. We're working on that. We'll get it to you immediately. We have about 4 or 5, I think, that are pending. But for the pod leaders, we'll get people to you as quickly as possible. Bear with us. Again, Robin and Lori, thank you so much. Thank you to Sarah Jones for looking over the IT portion of this. And we'll see everybody on the other side. And Lori and Robin, again, thank you for coming on board. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Go Dogs.
Bye, y'all.